Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a terrific day ahead of you. In today's edition of Everything You Need, I have a lot for you. But before that, a couple housekeeping things. One, I apologize for this video being out later than usual. Two, a lot of you would have just seen Grimsby Town knock Manchester United out of the cup. Now, naturally, it has to be given some weight in our decision-making process for the weekend and whether we should buy their assets. However, I am going to put it into context right throughout the video. They did not have their first choice 11 from the off, and had they done so, it would have been a very different game. Sesko's not going to start, I assume, on the weekend following his performance, and those two things alone completely changed the dynamic, never mind all the other variables. So I will give it the weight it deserves, but I'm not going to give it too much because I don't think it's overly important, aside from something psychological. But you know what? Sometimes a bit of pain is useful. It can get you to move, and who knows, maybe this defeat is actually enough pain for them to finally click. Maybe not, but like I said, I'm just trying to put it into perspective. In terms of what we have in Everything You Need, I've got for you the best free hit draft, why I don't think you should free hit at all, captaincy, 5 options discussed, Palmer, Saka, Wirtz, should we be selling them, and Palmer, Saka, Wirtz replacements, and just a general look at those. In terms of wildcard, I will look at that on Friday in a more in-depth section with chip strategy in combination. So if there's anything you'd like in addition to that, please let me know in the comments. But without anything else needing to be said, let's get into it. 5 captaincy options to discuss, and the first being one of the hottest forwards on the market at the moment, Chris Wood. First, I'll look at West Ham, and then we'll combine that with what Forest possess. Defensively, in the air, West Ham have had a really poor season. First, Sunderland hurt them, then Chelsea hurt them a lot, and now Strand Larsen's hurt them as well. In terms of morale, can't be great in the camp as well. Not only because they're losing games, but also because it doesn't really look like, at the moment, they've got the talent to really resurge and then have a really good Premier League season, essentially. You expect them to be there or thereabouts around the relegation zone, at best maybe 16th, 15th, 16th, right? And defensively, if you're going to be weak in the air, Chris Wood can certainly exploit you. A very good header of the ball in the box. So that's one route to goals. And not only from just open play crosses, but also set pieces. And if you are a Murillo or a Milenkovic owner, I would certainly be looking at that and thinking, you know what, I could get some here. Secondly, and potentially more importantly, West Ham's pivot. Now, this has been spoken about a lot on this channel, right? With all due respect, they lack legs, strength, and tackling in that area. Now, that's one thing to have, but it can be solved to some extent, right? You're probably not going to win a Champions League without it in both your plays in the pivot, especially when they're not like superstars going forward. But it can be solved by other means. For example, structurally, how other players work out of possession. When I say structurally, one thing you particularly want is players in close proximity to them and compactness in the middle. So essentially, mask that weakness. However, with their system, 2 of their players are so wide, 3 are already behind the ball, right? So you're taking out a lot of the ability for you to be compact in the middle, especially higher up the pitch, so that they can't get exploited. And the out of possession work that you're getting from the front 3 isn't enough to compensate for that pivot. So not only in transition can they be hurt, right, where that's really on display, but also they can just be played through because their press is not too challenging to beat. And once you get through that first line, if one of the others even steps up and the second pass is good into the guy receiving between the lines or close to the pivot, well, then they probably don't have the ability through the physicality to go and make it really difficult for the receiver. If you think about Chelsea's game, first game of the season against Palace, whenever Chelsea tried to put the ball in between the lines, Palace are so strong. They're so good defensively. It's so hard for the player to wriggle away or to complete the action you would like. Here, however, Chelsea showed this against West Ham. And the reason I use this example is 2 similar structures on paper, but very different outcomes. Of course, different qualities as well, just in terms of the fact that Palace are better. But nonetheless, certainly with West Ham, you put that ball in there, they don't have the physicality or even the 1v1 defensive quality in the pivot to make it too difficult for the receiver. And that obviously will lead to chances. So on West Ham's end, they can be played through and they're weak in defensive transition. And they've been shown to ship a lot of goals aerially. It's not looking great. But for Chris Wood, it certainly is. Now, you look at Palace, and again, on paper, they have a very similar structure to West Ham. But how it performs, both in terms of a system, but also in terms of its quality, is very different. If you look at the Nottingham Forest side, right, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, Wood, and then how the fullbacks function in this system, right? So, for example, you wouldn't have too many underlaps from Neco Williams, nor is he much of a passer, but more so he's better at crossing in the final third. Ola Aina's advancements, again, will primarily be crosses. Gibbs White is great at crashing the box, a great carrier, but being a pure creative and someone you want to break down blocks in this particular 10-like position, when he's not having too much support from the pivot in that sense, that's not a system that, when you put it all together, is really designed to break down low blocks. Now, that's not to say they're never going to have good moments against them. Of course they are. There's a lot of quality in that. But as you saw last season, it's very much a front four plus the fullbacks and the pivot that's designed to be very, very ruthless in transition, or at least long distance counter attacks and just quick attacks in that sense, as opposed to the slower ones. Chelsea saw this as well against Palace. You need really good block breaking weapons against them to hurt them. Now, Forest have some recruits on the bench in Amari Hutchinson, James McAtee, who can all help in this regard. But West Ham's structure was, I guess, somewhat similar. Doesn't possess the same qualities as Palace. So I don't think that this is going to be much of an issue. And with the players they have, with Adoy and Enjoy on the wings, with that quality, I think they're certainly going to hurt them. And then West Ham still give you the ability to hurt them in transition, even though that's where they're weak. They will step up and you'll see big spaces between the lines that their players don't cover particularly well. And as Chelsea exploited that and could have done so much more in the second half if we really clicked into sixth gear, then we could have scored a lot more. And Forest, as long as they don't take the foot off the gas, they have the opportunity to score quite a few here. Another thing is Chelsea Palace, and I keep referencing this for the similarities in structure. Chelsea didn't overload much because they had to be very careful of Eze, Mateta, Salah on the last line against their defenders, whereas against West Ham, you don't have to be as cautious of this, not only because their front three isn't as good, but also because actually getting into them is more unlikely with what they have. So maybe at times Forest can overload a little bit if they're trying to break down, particularly on one side, and create like a 4v3, and that could lead to a goal, right? So for all of those reasons, I like the Forest matchup against West Ham as a side. And then in terms of Chris Wood, I mean, he's in good form. Even though he didn't score against Palace, he had one good chance in the first half, had one decent chance in the second half, which got flagged for offside. And it just showed me that he was getting in and around there. He should have had more against Brentford. So whilst his finishing may appear to be bad, I thought the finish for the first goal against Brentford was quite good. And even the second one, it was quite composed. And he's shown it last year. So maybe a couple of mishaps, but the fact he's still getting opportunities, I'm more than happy with. And that's what I talk about. With the players he's got behind him as well. A lot of opportunities for him to get opportunities in this game. Obviously got penalties. The only doubt, maybe expected minutes. I mean, they've brought in new recruits, especially if they're flying. Maybe it's a chance to bring him off around 60. That's the only thing. I personally do think he'll get up to around 75, 80 though. And that should be enough for him to do quite a bit of damage. So I like this choice a lot. Mohammed Salah is always going to be a captaincy option in FPL when he's playing. But this week, he's far less popular than usual. And in this section, I will look at 3 different segments: the service into him, Arsenal out of possession, and Salah himself as a player and a person, and basically look to use that to see whether he's just about right for the community or he could be a little bit more or less popular. We will start with the service. This season, it's no secret that he's looked like a little bit of a worse asset at least, and that's primarily, in my opinion, due to the service that he's had into him. If you look last season, the most advanced midfielder in the Liverpool side was Dominic Szoboszlai. Where did he function? Primarily off the right. Therefore, Salah had someone to combine with, but more importantly, Salah had an unselfish right central midfielder who was high up the pitch, who could pass into him on a regular basis and would look to do that. His role was also one out of possession, which was optimized for Salah because he would do a lot of his work, but even in possession, his role, more so than goals and assists, was Salah, 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 Salah. And rightly so. He's your best player and the best player in the league. That's one thing. You also had Trent Alexander-Arnold behind you. Not only his underlaps and overlaps, which I would say are of a higher quality nature to both Jeremy Frimpong and Conor Bradley. Both of them obviously have attacking quality in that sense, but I still think Trent's more dangerous in those. And then the more obvious thing, Trent's passing. And those quick releases into Salah, especially in transition, where the block isn't settled, and you get Salah one-on-one with his fullback, then the opposition's really in trouble, and Salah looks like such a weapon. Now, whenever he's got the ball this time around, I still think he looks very sharp, but he's just getting it far less because Florian Wirtz now is Liverpool's most advanced midfielder, and he has tendencies to drift to the left and combine with Cody Gakpo, Hugo Ekitike, and at times Florian Wirtz and at times Milos Kerkez as well when he advances. So if Arnie Slot isn't to change his dynamic on Sunday. So Bosse at right back helps, but you still want someone right central mid field helping him out. And if he doesn't have this, the supply into him is definitely going to be cut, and the opportunity for him to return the frequency will certainly be lower. So that's something to consider. Secondly, Arsenal out possession, and in particular, Calafiori and his advancements this season. It's a atypical role for a left back because you've seen him pop up in these advanced areas so often, and not just overlapping. In fact, it's not mainly overlaps, it's underlaps. It's functioning as almost this left 8 behind Declan Rice at times, in the same line at times, but more frequently deeper when Rice is looking to be a bit more of a box threat. And this has brought about situations where he could have potentially returned, or if a pass was a little bit better or a decision was made that was a little bit different, he could have returned. The thing is, whilst this may not be so good for Liverpool's defence, Salah, particularly in transition, in the counter-attack, he could really hurt Arsenal here, right? He'll obviously have Gabriel one-on-one if that situation develops, which is no easy task, especially considering the quality of Gabriel's channel defending. But nonetheless, I mean, like, if you're going to give him the space, he can always hurt you. Given he's such a good creative passer as well, it's not like he's just trying to beat you to get a shot off. So that particular tactical implementation from Arteta could be one that I think Salah exploits. And I actually think that Calafiori may do it a bit less this game to compensate for Salah's quality. But if he doesn't, or if he's still doing it to some extent, that's something to consider. And then you don't have Havertz or Saka leading the Arsenal press, which means that they're certainly going to be weaker out of possession. And you might not have Martin Odegaard. So if Liverpool are to play through a little bit more, it's certainly going to be a bit easier. They haven't done so too much, but then again, they didn't have Ryan Gravenberch in the first game, which made a big difference. And then the Newcastle game, as Arnie Slot described, wasn't really much of a football game either. That's something to consider. And lastly, him as a person, I think it'd be easy to look at Arsenal, the best defence in the league, away from home as well, set up in that mean mid to low block and expect it to be really tough, especially given his service is still likely to be cut. The one thing I think you must give weight to is not only him as a player, but him as a person. He's the best Big Six game player we've ever seen in the Premier League, in his own backyard. And he'll certainly, I feel like he's always got something to prove. Even though he's the best player in the league, I still don't think people put him in that category and maybe distinguish him from the rest. There's enough in the amount he would deserve. And as such, that makes him even more dangerous because he's got a little bit more hunger in the belly. And then, like I said, he's just the absolute best. And he has this knack of always coming up with it. And this season is the perfect example. I mean, non-owners and non-captainers especially, you would have felt it. Bournemouth, first game, you think you're home and dry, 94th minute, goal. 100th minute against Newcastle, assist. He's always got a knack, and I think that has to be accounted for. It can't always just be data in football. Sometimes you've got to look at these more intangible variables, and he's got it more than anyone. Now, here's what I'm going to do in relation to United's performance against Grimsby. I personally am not going to give it so much weight. I will look at it from a psychological perspective a bit, as I will explain. But the actual football side of it, I'm not going to give too much weight. In fact, I think it might actually be a good thing. Allow me to explain. I thought Benjamin Sesko was quite raw against Arsenal. I thought he wasn't great against Fulham, and I don't think he had a particularly good game tonight either. Following those three performances and the fact that the Grimsby one was tonight and the game is just on Saturday, I don't think Amorim will chuck him into the starting lineup. And the other thing is he took the 10th penalty in the shootout, so he's probably not banging on the manager's door saying, start me, because the confidence probably just isn't quite there yet. And with that in mind, I think you'll see a front three of Mbeumo, Cunha, and Mount. And that I actually think is a good thing because you certainly get Cunha operating in those 9-like zones a little bit more, which I think is a good thing for him. That's that. That's how I'm going to view the starting 11 and Cunha's positioning for the game. I personally think that United, it can't get too much worse. It can still get worse. They could lose to Burnley and then there'll be an even bigger reaction from their fan base. But I don't think they will lose to Burnley. I think they've got enough quality, as I'm going to explain with some of the football that I watched and football I watched back. And as such, I'm not going to overreact to the Grimsby performance because it was not their first choice 11. Had it been their first choice 11 from the start, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because I'm convinced they would have put them away and put them away fairly easily. Right? With all due respect and congratulations to Grimsby. I mean, you completely deserve it. All right, now going on to the analysis. I was watching some of Fulham Manchester United back, and it made me more confident in Fulham doing well, in United doing well, because I was also watching some of Burnley, Sunderland as well back. And what I noticed was Fulham, as I spoke about in transfer plans from my first viewing of the game, did really, really, really well to make it super compact in the middle against Manchester United's build-up. What they did is they employed this 2-3, 3-2 structure, right? Even 1-4, whatever you want to call it, right? It was a little bit fluid, but one version of that. And they would essentially block the lanes into the pivot, and they would make sure they had one man very tight, at least, to each of the pivot players. Now, the three behind were Sasa Lukic, Sanderberg, and Alex Iwobi. It's a really physical three as well for United to contend with. The wing-backs in Fulham's out-of-possession system were very narrow and almost tucked in so that they could double up on the 10s, and if the 10s ever were to receive the ball, they would have a very hard time keeping it and doing anything from there. United's only real out was diagonal switches or balls round the side into the wing-backs, and that's probably not where United are going to hurt teams most from. So, that doesn't sound great. But I don't think Burnley are going to implement that structure. I don't think, with all due respect, they've got the players to do so. And I watched the performance in Game Week 1 against Spurs, and it was very different to what Fulham employed against Manchester United. Now, maybe Scott Parker sees that and he does employ it. But even if so, I'm not sure they've got the physicality or the 1v1 defensive quality across the pitch for it to be anywhere near as efficient. I'd say as a side, they probably will be, no, they almost definitely will be a little bit more open than Burnley, than Fulham. And even if not, like I said, with the 1v1 defensive quality across the pitch, I personally think United exploit it. So I'm quite comfortable saying that United beat Burnley on Saturday. In terms of captaincy, I wouldn't personally be putting it on Bruno Fernandes. And I know a lot of the community like that, especially on X, but I wouldn't. With his positioning, you are gambling a little bit that he scores a particular type of goal, because realistically, he's not going to see the box too much. So you are gambling that, one, he has a really good shot from range. That's about it. I mean, how else is he going to score if he's not really getting into the box? And the front three are not a traditional front three where you've got wide wingers, but they're narrow as well, right? Taking up that space. Of course, Manchester United's system isn't just a pure five at the back. At times, there'll be four at the back of the ball, and Bruno will step higher. But is it enough whereby I can justify captaining him, especially when you've got Matheus Cunha ahead? I wouldn't say so. If you are going to go for a United player, I would be going for Cunha. Yes, he hasn't scored yet. And yes, he's missed a penalty against Grimsby. But he really should have done against Fulham. I mean, hit the post, and he should have scored the second chance well and a saved. Great save, but should have still done better. Got close against Arsenal. Got close tonight as well. And even when he's not shooting, it's just the fact that he's carrying so well into these spaces and he's looking to make something happen. He loves the ball more than most players in the league. He demands it, and you get a really high number of opportunities in the game for him to return. So if you are going to go here, I would go for Matheus Cunha out of these two. I personally wouldn't go for Brian Mbeumo, and this is more just something that I observed, and it's very similar to that of Florian Wirtz. When I spoke about Florian Wirtz preseason, one of the reasons I avoided him, and particularly after Game Week 1, is how he felt in the Premier League. I didn't think he had felt the Premier League, its rhythm and its intensity, and he was stepping up in gears correctly. Down, yeah, sure. And working out a possession, yeah, sure. But on the ball, when he needs to go and be in that 5th, 6th gear, I didn't think he'd quite felt the Premier League there yet. Whilst I don't think it's the intensity that's the case for Brian Mbeumo, he just doesn't seem at home in the system, the relationships on the pitch, and just the general body language to me isn't suggestive of someone who's super confident flying in that side. Whereas with Cunha, it's more so there. So if I was going to captain one of the 2/3, I would captain Cunha. It's not to say I would do it. At the end, I'll reveal my rankings, but I think this certainly has some weight, and if you did go there, at least I'd understand it. I will actually start with the rankings for the captaincy now we've discussed the other three, and I'll make no secret of the fact that I think Erling Haaland is 4th on the list. For me, number 1 is Chris Wood. Number 2 is Mohammed Salah, marginally over Matheus Cunha. I just think he's got a little bit more haul potential, and I feel a little bit safer of him getting that haul. And then 4th, by a fairly big gap, is Erling Haaland. I would say that I think Chris Wood has a really good shot at a haul this game week. Whereas with Cunha, I can basically seeing him score, which is the reason that I bought him. But hauling, I'm not as confident. It'd be great, but I'm not as confident. If you look at the game last season at the Amex, in the first half, it was a very lethargic 4-2-4 press from Brighton, 4-4-2-4-2-4 press, and it could even get misinterpreted because of how lethargic it was, and it was heavily exploited. I mean, City have so many players that are good on the ball. They played through it, and when you don't give them that intensity, they will play through it. They did, and they should have scored more goals, and they looked quite dangerous. Second half, I remember Hurst spoke about it in his halftime interview. Belieber might have come on, and they just ramped it up. That press was so much more intense, and City really struggled against it, and they won the game 2-1 in the end. Now, there's a couple of things to discuss here. The second being Thomas Frank's success with his high press last week, but also if Brighton can actually replicate that. Someone who led that was João Pedro. Don't have João Pedro this time around. And if Jorginho Ruta is to be injured, then they are going to start with Danny Welbeck up front, and I don't think he can replicate what they did in terms of his out of possession quality, and as such, City should have some more freedom on the ball and just to probably look a lot better as a result. If they are somehow to replicate it, then Thomas Frank showed that you can certainly have some success against them should you do so, especially not having Rodri's press resistance and ball playing ability in the middle of the park and build up ability, right? So that's that. In terms of Erling Haaland himself, the conditions will be there to exploit, right? They will be on offer. It's just whether City can harness their own attacking dynamics in a way where he can then actually go and take what's on offer. Because Brighton's line height will not be one that's in their own 6-yard box, right? It will be higher than maybe other managers would do so with that squad. And they always give you a bit more space in which to exploit than other sides do, traditionally, when they're playing Manchester City. Haaland can obviously exploit that. And against Brighton, he always looks somewhat dangerous. It's just City's attacking dynamics that concern me, because I expect Brighton to be very compact in the middle. I don't expect Minter and Matoma to be too wide out of possession. I think, like I said, they'll be quite compact in the middle. And if City come, and let's say, as an example, they play Marmoush on the left, well, all of a sudden that's bad for Haaland, because now he's functioning as a bit of a target man and someone for Marmoush to play off and then to go and hurt the opposition, right? As opposed to Haaland being the sole focus, the attacking dynamics being optimized for him and the team creating for him. It depends who they have on that right side as well. Oscar Bob will be interesting, but in a game where the physical level is a little bit higher, is he going to be able to show off how good of a block breaker he is and how good of a creative he is? I'm not as sure, because I don't think Brighton get pinned as much as, let's say, Wolves did game week 1. If this was Erling Haaland in a Manchester City team where the dynamics were optimized, I'd be so much more confident in it. But where I have not seen that against Spurs, and Brighton in big games, as we've seen last season, they're solid. They're very, very solid. I don't feel particularly comfortable captaining him. Also, him being a forward doesn't help, right? Especially if you've got some other issues. And for him to score a brace, I really don't feel so confident, because for a while now, for a long time, he hasn't been this unbelievable option, because they haven't been creating a number of chances for him in the amount you would like. So these are all things to consider, and it's for those reasons that I'm happy to avoid. These three midfielders are very much the talk of the town, particularly top and bottom, and a lot of people are looking to sell them. So let's see if you should. And we'll start with the man in the middle, Bukayo Saka, because for me, out of the three, this is the easiest one by a mile. And my answer, in most cases, is yes, sell him. You don't actually know when he's going to return exactly. I think with Cole and what you've heard on social media, you can pretty much guess by game week 4, he would be there. It's more so if he's there for game week 3, as opposed to if he's there for game week 5, because by 4, you definitely expect him there. But with Saka, there's rumors it's 3 to 4 weeks, and that's come out and been quite clearly said. So you can't even guarantee a start in 5, right? And 5 isn't exactly an easy game. It's Manchester City. And 6 isn't particularly easy either. You've got Newcastle, right? Who will love that game, and he'll definitely be fired up about it. So for me, when he holds so much value in your side, you can basically go to anyone as a result of selling him. I would get rid. It's too lengthy of an injury for me to keep. Yeah, okay, you might have had other transfer plans. I completely respect that. I can understand why it would be annoying. But there's so much upside on offer to having that spot filled with a good player who's actually playing, as opposed to a good player who's just going to be on the bench. And then the other thing is there's a decent chance you'll Cole Palmer or Florian Wirtz as well, and you may have some potentially other issues and blockages to accessing that upside. Cole Palmer, I would say, is the hardest of the three. And I would only sell him if you're truly confident in your replacement and you're not too attached to a transfer plan where you are going to really, really, really want a couple or 3 free transfers going into the international break. I wouldn't say there's too many standout options, if any at all. I will go on to the next slide and discuss them. But even Cunha, is he so good, like so good that you absolutely have to make the transfer? No. Now, have I done it? Yeah. But I'm okay accepting that short-term upside. However, I know that this is not a slam dunk decision or anywhere close. And if someone were to say they disagree, I would completely understand. Like I said earlier as well, he's probably back for Game Week 4. And if Enzo Maresca is to persist with the system that he had set up for him at West Ham, where you have someone holding his width on the right, you don't have Enzo Fernandes in that right half space, but rather on the left. And you've got Cole Palmer functioning in a 10-like position on the right-hand side. Yeah, the dynamics are great for him to then go and really get attacking returns. Another thing is his dual 10 in João Pedro is also someone who off the ball will work, and that will decrease the responsibilities for him in that sense, almost Salah-like in terms of how the rest of the team do it for him. And there's a lot of returns on offer from then on. So if you didn't want to sell and your squad is strong enough and you have a transfer plan, by all means, I completely understand. Equally, if there's upside on offer in your eyes this week, in Cunha, in some of the replacements we're about to discuss, and again, I get it as well. And I don't think anyone can really criticize you, especially if you want to go and captain your new differential this week, or just the player you brought in. Last one, Florian Wirtz. I'd have him in the middle in terms of the decision, how hard it is. I would actually say no in most cases. You've already got the Palmer injury to potentially deal with, and at least Florian Wirtz is playing. You've got the Saka one to potentially deal with. Maybe you have Jorginho Ruta. Maybe you have Ryan Knight-Nori. Maybe something comes up in the international break. Maybe we have to look at the fact that he's a £150 million player for a reason. And yeah, you know what? Like I said earlier in the video, he hasn't settled in the Premier League as you would have liked. I spoke about it earlier, but in case you missed that section, I don't think he's felt the intensity and the rhythm of the Premier League quite yet. I don't think he's gone into that 5th, 6th gear when he's got the ball, which is really what I just think it is. I think it's very much mental and emotional as opposed to anything to do with his body footballing ability, if that makes sense. Is Arsenal going to be a really tough game for him? Yeah, probably. But he's still got the quality in a moment to get a return. Is Game Week 4 a really good fixture? Yes, and I wouldn't even be surprised if I snapped him up for that. I really fancied some short-term upside. And like I said, going into the break with more free transfers would be lovely, and I'd love to be in that position. I'm very happy with the position I'm in, but I'd also love to be in that position. And he's not bad enough with the current climate for me to sell. Now, had there been no injuries elsewhere? Yeah, maybe, but when you probably own at least one of them, I think it just makes sense just to see it out till Game Week 4, maybe Game Week 5, and then reassess from there. Because from 6, the fixture swing anyway. And with Palace away in 6, you'll probably be looking to offload. So maybe a couple more weeks and then you can get rid. On screen, I have 5 potential midfield replacements for the options that we just discussed. I'm going to start on the outside with the Spurs boys. And for me, I don't like them. They're not for me. Mohammed Kudus, as I discussed in preseason, is a really good player. An assist, yes, he will get at times, as he showed in Game Week 1. But this is not an asset with a high ceiling because of his goal threat. And even the number of assists you get aren't enough to offset that. In the past, maybe you have Trent, obviously a defender, so it helps when he can get clean sheets. But his assist potential was so high that you were okay paying 7 million for it. 7 million defender. We're in 6 million categories now. That feels like a foreign game. But with Kudus' lack of ceiling, I don't think you can justify it. Not to me, at least. Not with how I like to play and how I view the game and my philosophy on it. I would not be going that. Purely for the ceiling, right? Player quality, yeah, sure. But this is a game about points. And I want someone who's able in 1 week to make it all up or to basically send me into liftoff. I wouldn't say he has that. Johnson, 1 expected minutes just in case like Odebert takes minutes off him here or there and maybe the occasional start. But more so because this guy's ceiling, I mean, he loves to score in games. He has a knack for it. He almost has that goal-scoring gene to an extent. But it's just one and done with him so often. And he just doesn't get holes. So in a different way to Kudus, because he's more consistent and he's more of a goal threat, I get why you're going there. I see the player quality. But I just, for me, can't justify it in this moment with the ceiling when you've got some options, for example, in Salah, even in keeping Wirtz, you probably have a little bit of a higher ceiling. and then obviously Matheus Cunha or even Ismaila Sarr on screen, who's shown their abilities to horse. Now, moving on to the other guys, Semenyo, I'm going to speak about ceiling here again. He scored a brace in the last game of the season, right? And I think that was his first one of the season. Then he scores a brace game week 1 against Liverpool, and I'm like, wow, has he turned a corner? Is this finally the Semenyo unleashed? And maybe not the final version, but certainly closer to it. And then I see the game against Wolves, and he misses 2 to 3 good chances. And with him, I'm just not 1,000,000% sure that right now he's taken that next step and he stayed there, right? Because he got 2 braces in back-to-back games, and I was really happy for him, and I was really impressed. I was like, okay, hopefully he's just clicked up a gear now, right? And he's had this thing, I think, somewhat similar to Minter, where he's got all the quality to finish, and he's got that more so than Minter, I would say. Maybe it's just a little bit of a mental block. That's how I would interpret it. So I can understand going here. I mean, the fixtures are pretty good. Bournemouth looks good. He looks good. But his ceiling is not something that I'm completely sold on in the way that I am with Sarr and Cunha. And it's for that reason that I have these two above. With Ismaila Sarr and Matheus Cunha, however, I feel more confident going into any game that there's that 16-pointer in that back pocket. There's that brace in the back pocket. More so than I do with Semenyo, personally. And that's why I've got these two out in front. To speak about Ismaila Sarr, one, he's playing Aston Villa, who he's got a superb record against, as has been floating about in the community on X in the 6 games that he's played against them. Then he faces Sunderland, and then he faces West Ham. So he could have a really good time. Now, I don't think this Aston Villa fixture will be anywhere near as good as maybe it's been made out to be in the community, but the fact that this is the game that I think Aston Villa get a little bit better defensively, because some of the chances they concede against Brentford, I think Unai Emery will see that as unacceptable, and he'll probably change the approach as opposed to just the personnel. Maybe that happens as well, but more so the approach. And I think he'll account for Palace's threat on the last line in Mateta and Sarr, but also Munoz's advancements as well. And I think he'll have to tweak it, because if he does what he did against Brentford with Mateta and Sarr going in behind, and Munoz even at times, I think they'll struggle, right? But then obviously you've got Sunderland and West Ham after, and he's full of quality. So as an option at 6.5 for that price, really solid. What I would say with him is the loss of Eze is a big deal. And one thing with Palace is they didn't hurt Forest too much in that game. Obviously he scored, but they didn't make too many chances, right? Especially in the second half. And not having Eze's carrying in transition, and not having those carries and then releases in transition, and then the overall quality against the block, or just a more settled possession, that's really going to hurt. Like, not having that source and supply, that's going to hurt. So maybe you have to reduce his output slightly as a result of that. But nonetheless, still a good option. But I'd say you definitely have to reduce it. And then my favorite of the bunch, Matheus Cunha, just so involved all the time and such high quality. That's probably the simplest way I can put it. He has so many opportunities to return in a game because of what he generates for himself. The other thing is, if he's to play with Mount, which I very much think he will be, and Bruno, you've got 2 players who are very competent combining, and 2 players that are very unselfish in that fashion as well. So he will get a lot of the ball. I have no doubt about that. And even Mbeumo's creativity is good. I think it's hurting due to the position he's playing and the angles that are available to him. I think if they were wide, it'd be much easier. And this is something I spoke about with Jared Bowen shooting as well from a more inside position, but we will come on to that another day. But very simply, the quality, the number of opportunities, and obviously the fixture in Game Week 3 is good. 4 and 5 are interesting because City defensively look like they can be gotten at, especially in transition where United are strongest with Mbeumo and Cunha. Why wouldn't you be? And Bruno. So I don't think Game Week 4 is as bad as people make it out to be. So we will see what happens down the line. But for this week, at least, short-term upside, I like it. If you put 3 and 4 together, I really don't think it's that bad. Even Chelsea in 5, right? Like, we can be hurt. And then 6 and 7, you've got Sunderland or Brentford and Sunderland, which is cool. Yeah, he hasn't put the ball in the back of the net yet, but the signs are all there. And at some point, it's probably going to click for him, right? So I have him out in front. Yes, he's the most expensive, but I would say he's worth it. The best player, in my opinion, on this list when it comes to FPL, definitely. And he's probably got the best position as well out of any of them in terms of the role. If you could not free hit, I think that would be magnificent. I think it would be magnificent for your season. I'm going to show you what I think to be the optimal free hit draft. And I'm going to show you that now, actually. And what you can see in this, I think my screen might have frozen with my mouth open, but we'll keep going, is that the primary advantage of this free hit, in my eyes, is to get 2 Manchester United midfielders, triple Nottingham Forest. You've already got Salah there, which we'll come on to, and then a bit of Newcastle, well, triple Newcastle as well, right? Now, first things first about the draft. You may disagree with some of the picks. Some of the picks, most of them I don't think you'd really mind. I think the ones you will dislike are maybe one of the Newcastle mids, because you think at least I should have an Elanga or a Barnes in place, and Martinez as well. To explain Martinez, I think in this game he's got a high ceiling, because if Villa do well at ensuring that Palace, when they were on Villa's last line, aren't able to penetrate in behind, without Eze, I don't see them as too much of a threat, because I don't think Mitchell from left wing back as well provides too much threat, with all due respect. And I'm expecting a new approach from Emery. So without all that being said, I can see them personally getting a result and maybe a clean sheet. And Palace have obviously got a fixture midweek. So that's that. The only other thing I'd say you could really dislike about this side is, again, not having Elanga or Harvey Barnes or both. One reason I've gone Jacob Ramsey is with Tonali and Joelinton's injury, I'm pretty sure the midfield is going to be Bruno Guimaraes, Jacob Ramsey, and probably Lewis Miley. So you'll see Jacob Ramsey, functioning as an 8, but more so as a 10 in that left-hand side. And that could really be his best position, in my opinion, and a really good route to goals and assists. And Bruno G, I've gone for a bit of everything here. He might be on penalties with Gordon and Isak out, DEFCON, and then he's still got some open play threat as well. If you wanted to go Elanga or Barnes, I would completely understand. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Jacob Murphy starts this game. And he's a bit of a flat track bully, as we found out last season. But aside from that, there weren't so many things that appealed to me. Look, you'll all have your preferences, right? There's no Chelsea. We'll speak about that tomorrow as well. I don't fancy us to put Fulham to the sword. I think they could score, and Jack Pedro could definitely return. But do I think him to be essential on a free hit? No. If he scores a hat-trick, then I apologise, but I don't think he's going to be essential on a free hit. Erling Haaland, I discussed earlier. I would rather have Salah for the reasons discussed earlier in the 2 captaincy sections. And the rest of the team, well, we can get onto it, but that's fairly template and understandable. Those are the points where I just wanted to discuss that you might disagree with me. To go on to the rest, one more thing that I almost disagree with myself on is Livramento. I just couldn't find anyone else for that third defender spot. I didn't want to double with Aston Villa. I thought that was a bit too risky. I've got a feeling Sunderland score against Brentford, so I didn't want to do that. I've spoken about my views on Chelsea. It's not really anyone else. I did think about putting Virgil in there. DEFCON, maybe a corner goal. Unlikely, but maybe. And I wouldn't say it's impossible for them to keep a clean sheet. I don't look at Arsenal's attack in terms of what I think they're going to go with at Anfield. It doesn't look particularly menacing. It's just Liverpool's defence hasn't been exactly great as well, right? So, yeah, that third defender spot is the one that I'd be most open to changing, because I think Leeds could score against a weakened Newcastle in midfield. Good for the game in terms of goals, right? Hence why I've gone a double Newcastle attack, and I think in general they've got a lot of quality that will supersede what Leeds have. But, nonetheless, I still think they could concede. In terms of the rest of the team, I mean, Bruno and Cunha, obviously picked earlier. If you're going to free hit, then what's the point of free hitting without them? Right? That's one of the things you mainly look to get, unless your team's in an absolute dire state and you hate them. And then West Ham, like I said, target that aerial weakness that they have. They don't look so great going forward, so double Nottingham Forest defence when there weren't too many clean sheets on offer this week, in my opinion, made sense. And then Chris Wood as well. Richarlison in such good form. Spurs are playing well. Bournemouth will always give you a chance. I think you can exploit that. Hence why I've gone for this team. But the main point about this and why I showed this was, if we go back here, all right, with the notes on screen, aside from the United boys and Newcastle, there's not too much there that you don't already have access to with transfers. You've probably got a bit of Forest defence. You probably have Salah. You could get to a United mid and Wood in a couple moves. Sell Palmer, sell one of your forwards. And so many of you in that position. And is it really worth free hitting for that triple Newcastle away at Leeds? I wouldn't say so. I would be more willing to use transfers and even a hit to get your squad better and somewhat closer to that, on the assumption you share the same views on the players, and go from there. But to use a free hit, I think it's so powerful, right? It's so powerful. It is the best bailout chip, and it's a bailout chip with so much upside. There will become a week where I think, in general, the landscape will be more challenging. Injuries, there'll be some suspensions, there'll be this player. The game now is still very unsettled. It's probably never been as unsettled as this ever, I think, right? because you haven't really been able to clarify this is the player to go for, this is the player to go for. They all look a little bit up and down, right? And I think when you're using a free hit, you want a little bit more certainty because there's the option for it to go really wrong. And I don't think it has to go wrong because you've got the transfers to sort it out. Most of you have to. And most of you have got the squads where you've got a decent amount of that. You'll have Salah. And with 2 free transfers, you can have Wood and Cunha. And you'll probably have, you might even already have Bruno. And you might even have double Forest defense. At least you might have one, and so on, right? And it's not like, for example, having Sanchez or Cucurella is too bad, irrespective of my opinion. It's not like having Gerard Pedro is too bad, irrespective of my opinion, so on and so on. So that's why I wouldn't do it. The opportunity down the line, I think, just massively exceeds it. And whilst that team could score a lot of points, in terms of how many points it would score over your current team with transfers, I don't think it'd be huge in comparison to what it could be down the line. That is all she wrote for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly hope you enjoyed, as I did. If you did, please do consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And so many of you watch that are not subscribed. Thank you so much for all your support, as always. And I shall see you quite shortly for not everything you need for team selection. Have a terrific day ahead of you. Goodbye.